Hi everybody, it's me, Chrissy Mack, and welcome back to my channel. Tonight, for my weekly series where I try to do my makeup and tell a ghost story at the same time, or tell you a legend at the same time, I decided that I wanted to talk about the ghost of the Hollywood sign, which is Peg Entwistle. I hope that I pronounced her last name correctly. I believe I did, but I kind of have a speech impediment, so sometimes I don't always get things right. But I also thought I would try to do a fairly authentic 1930s look for you as well. I've already applied so much foundation to my face, it's insane, because I don't have the cake foundation that they would have used back then. And I drew my eyebrows on ahead of time as well, because as those of you that know me personally know, I accidentally shaved off my eyebrows in July and they still haven't fully grown back. So I was terrified of blocking my brows to do a correct 30s brow. So this is the closest that I'm gonna get. The biggest difference between a 30s brow and a 20s brow is that the 20s brow is actually lower, whereas a 30s brow is more of a rainbow type shape. So I did try to get them as round as I could, but since my brows are growing back so sporadically, I didn't even want to risk like blocking them. So they're not 100% accurate, but I'm gonna try to at least do the rest of my makeup fairly like it would have been done then, and in the color that would have been most popular back then. They didn't have a lot of products available back in the 30s or the 20s, but I did look up colors that they had available as far as eyeshadows went. It looked like an olive green was the most popular color. Brown was a popular color, and black was still a popular color that followed from the 20s. I'm gonna just do a simple olive green. So let's do this and then we'll figure out how well this works out. So, Peg Entwistle. Entwistle, I can say this word. She was born as Millicent Lillian Entwistle, and she was born in Wales, and she was born February 5th, 1908. So shortly after she was born, her family actually moved from Wales to London because her father was a stage actor. Oh, and you'll notice I'm going to really not be using many tools either because they didn't back then. Anyway, so he was a stage actor and also a stage manager in the theater. So he worked in London. And then they ended up moving soon after her mother's death, which was in 1910. And they ended up moving when she was 9 years old from London to New York because her father got work in New York. And it's my understanding that he had work both acting and stage managing. And he remarried and had two sons with his second wife. So she had two half brothers. And unfortunately, bless his heart, his second wife also died. She died of meningitis. So poor Peg lost two moms, at an early age. And then her dad actually was hit by a limousine. That was in 1922. It was a hit and run. And her dad passed away from his injuries. So her brothers were sent to live with her aunt and uncle in Ohio. And she ended up going into a reform school in Boston and focusing on theater because that was a passion of her father's, and she learned to be passionate about it too. And through a friend of her father, she'd gotten a walk-on role once in Hamlet, and she was well received. And at the age of 17, she was actually asked to become a part of the Broadway Theater Company, which is a huge deal because she was the youngest member ever asked to join. So it's a big deal. She was actually a very good actress, very, very good stage actress, and one of her biggest fans, actually. And she spoke about it throughout her career, even, was Betty Davis. She was a child and saw Peg in a play. It was called The Wild Duck, and was so moved by her performance that when she left with her mother, she said, I want to be like Peg when I grow up. So she's very, very good at stage acting. And she captivated the crowds. She was in all sorts of plays, always getting rave reviews. Well, then she was invited to go on tour all over the country with the theater company, and she did. And she ended up meeting her husband through this, but the marriage didn't last very long. Turns out that he lied about ever being married before. He had been, and he didn't tell her. And he also lied about having children. He actually had a 6-year-old son who later on actually became a successful actor himself. I wish I could remember the guy's name. Robert Keith. That's her husband's name. Brian Keith was the son. I knew it would come to me. So anyway, based on the fact that he lied to her about ever being married before, and also she reported he hit her. He was abusive to her. She filed based on cruelty for divorce, and she was still very young at this time. So divorce is not a popular option to begin with back then, and to do so at such a young age really was unpopular. And rumor has it that she was not invited back to the touring company because of her then ex-husband, because he was a big player in that scene. So the Great Depression hits because the stock market crashes in 1929. That means people can't really afford to go to the theater to watch plays anymore. So her roles are starting to dry up. And not only that, but the last couple of plays that she was in, they didn't run for very long. They were considered flops, not because of her performance, just because the plays weren't good. But she was taking work wherever she could. So since around this time, talking films were actually taking off in Hollywood, she did what a lot of young actors and actresses from New York did at that time. She decided, I'm going to move to Hollywood. And so she initially lived in the YWCA. The name of it was the Hollywood Studio Club. It's where young women could go who were hoping to make it big. It was in close proximity to all of the big production companies at the time, so that you could walk to each one to get to your auditions. And she initially lived there. She did get some theater work. This is the weird part, y'all. Apparently, they didn't have any shimmer back then. It was all matte, and they liked for their eye makeup to be shiny, so they used Vaseline. So this is gonna crease and drive me crazy. But we doing it. Here we go. Vaselining it up. 1932 was like her last Broadway show, and then she moved to Hollywood. She moved to LA. And initially she lived in the women's club there. Well, her aunt and uncle and brothers actually lived on Beechwood Drive, which was within sight of the Hollywoodland sign. Because back then, it was not the Hollywood sign, it was Hollywoodland. And it was a publicity thing to advertise the land that was for sale up there, because they were building a subdivision. So She got like odd roles here and there, acting in just like plays. She was in one play with Humphrey Bogart even, and it was Billy Burke and Humphrey Bogart were in it, and it was called the play was called Mad Hopes, I believe, if I'm not mistaken. I do know that it was at the Belasco Theater, but it shut down really quickly. Like it only had a few runs, and it was done. And Humphrey actually left Los Angeles for a while after that because he couldn't find work. Like work was actually not easy to find. So she's going on auditions and she's trying. She's getting small roles here and there in the theater, like you do. Oh, I know this is weird, right? But they used cream blusher to make heart-shaped faces back then. So we're going to see if this works because I couldn't find my cream blush. And the young ladies that didn't have cream blush would use their lipstick as rouge. So we're going to see if I can make this blend. Wish me luck. So anyway, Humphrey ended up leaving Hollywood for a while after that, just because he couldn't find work. And I mean, that's a big time name now. We all know who that is. So, I mean, now I got pink cheeks. It's a little pinker than I'd like, but whatever. It's through her theater work, though, that she was noticed by RKO. They were a radio company, and they were also a movie company. And they offered her a part to audition for in a film called 13 Women. Now, she made a mistake here. Like, you want, obviously, to get in film. That's what she went there for. But she had other obligations in the theater that she had already committed to, other parts that she committed to. She canceled all her other obligations. She just was like, sorry, guys. I got this part, and yeah, it's in a talkie, and I'm gonna do this thing because that's what I came here for. Sorry, not sorry. Let me powder my face. I don't have a powder puff. I wish I did, because that's how they would have done it. But anyway, so she canceled on all of her other engagements that she had committed to. God, it feels so weird to be this pale, but they were really into white skin back then. So that she could take this part. And this was going to be her big break. She was convinced of it, because again, she felt almost like she had been cursed since the Depression started because her work had dried up. She was getting so few parts. She was auditioning, and nobody was listening to her. Nobody was interested in her. She was just like every other pretty blonde that was in Hollywood at the time. So she thought, this is my big break. Well, she films 13 Women, and they did a test screening of it. And of course, the censors watched it as well. And it was determined that it had to be changed. It had to be changed. It was a flop across the board. The censors were not happy at all with it. Peg was playing a very progressive type role in this, I have to say, for the time. I wish that I could see the uncut version of this film because I actually looked up the film to watch it after reading some about her because I wanted to see her one film she finally made it into. And they cut her part down to, she only ended up on screen for about 3 minutes. That's it. And initially, she was in one of the lead roles. So she was playing a woman who killed her husband and was in love with a woman. And the censors were like, hell no. No, sorry. Not happening. Not on our watch. You cut this. You fix this. You make it appropriate for the public. So poor Peg, she finds out that some of her greatest work, in her opinion, is just now ended up on the editing floor. And she's not even invited to the premiere. So that's adding like insult to injury. So this woman's already been down on her luck. She's now blackballed by the theater companies in Hollywood. And now like she's not even invited to the premiere of the movie that she felt like was the greatest work she's ever done. Like, what the balls? So she's in a deep, deep depression. Now, her death date is September 16th of 1932. That's an important date I want you to remember. I'm going to try to talk while I'm painting my lips because I actually have to paint my lips because they had a certain way that they did it. Thankfully, my mouth is shaped the way that they wanted their mouths to be shaped back then. Thank God. Because I'd be screwed if it wasn't, because I can't find any of my lip liners. But I was trying to find colors that they had available at the time, because what they would typically do is they would use a lighter shade here, and then they would do almost an ombre here. But they wanted to over-exaggerate the upper lip. Of course, the Cupid's bow was important, and then have a larger lower lip. I thankfully naturally have big lips, and I have the shape that they looked for back then, thank God. So anyway, so she finds out when the premiere is going to be and is devastated when she finds out that she's not even invited. Which is, like I said, insult to injury. And again, nobody's giving her the time of day. Oh, I just want to give a shout out to this color because red lip was in for them. This is the oldest color that is made by Revlon, the oldest red they've ever made, and it is called Cherries in the Snow, and it is my friend Trina's favorite red. It's my least favorite red, but I know that this was a color that was available to them at the time, so I wanted to throw that on. Again, I wish I had liner. Because that would make this so much easier. So anyway, on the date of the premiere, which was September 16th, she was in a very deep depression and she wanted to go back to New York. She decided she wanted to go back to New York. And she realized she didn't even have enough money to go back home. And of course, since it was the Depression, her uncle and her aunt couldn't help her any more than give her, room and board. Sorry, y'all, I can't talk and do this ombre at the same time. And they're trying to encourage her to try to get other odd jobs since, for every 100 auditions that you do, you may or may not get one part. I mean, that's just how it is. And she was like, I've done 101. I'm not getting anything. And they were trying to keep her spirits up. And, kind of were like, what would your dad have wanted you to do? He encouraged you when you were little and you said you wanted to be an actress. He told you had to have a tough skin. This is one of those times that you got to have a tough skin, kid. Everybody's having a hard time. Read the papers. People are jumping off of bridges right now. Times are really hard. This depression's no joke. So, you have to keep getting out there. You have to keep trying. And she's like, I know. Well, she told her uncle that afternoon that she was going to run up to the drugstore. She wanted to get a book or something. Or at least that's how it's told, is that she wanted to get a book or meet some friends. I read several different theories of what she was doing or what she said she was doing. I'm gonna put some more Vaseline up here, even though I'm already hating how this feels. Look at that crease. Oh my God. And where he lived on Beechwood Drive, again, you could see the Hollywood land sign from the sidewalk. It was only a mile away, maybe a mile and a half. So she did not go to the drugstore. Instead, she wrote a very simple suicide note, put it in her purse, put on a very fancy dress, a new pair of shoes, and made her way up to the Hollywood sign. And her suicide note read, I'm afraid that I'm a coward. I'm sorry for everything. If I had done this a long time ago, it would have saved a lot of pain. And then she signed it PE. And that actually caused some confusion later on. So anyway, that's all she had in her purse, no identification. And she gets to the Hollywood land sign, and there was a maintenance ladder that was left on the H. You know, she didn't just like rock climb it. She used a ladder. I don't have a spit palette, so I gotta use regular mascara. And they didn't use eyeliner back then. Huh, how about that? Anyway, so she used this maintenance ladder to climb up a 50-foot H. Depressed out of her mind, thinks her life is over. She's only 24 years old, mind you. 24 years old. And she has the most beautiful view of Los Angeles from the top of that H. You know, I can only imagine the things that were going through her mind at that moment, because she was able to see all the lights of the city that she felt like ruined her. You know, she moved out there with big dreams. She had been such a success in New York. And then she moved out there and she was nobody. You know, she was nothing. And for her, her art, theater was her life. It was everything to her. She put every bit of herself in all of her performances. She was a firm believer that you had to give yourself in order to give a good performance, period. Your audience had to feel what you were emoting to them. So again, that's why she was so highly regarded while she was in New York, because she had that ability. And she was just like, people in Hollywood I'm a nobody here. Apparently I have no talent. I'm a no talent hack, just like everybody else. So she took it in, thought whatever it was that she was thinking. One of her shoes fell off. I do know that at the sign. And she had left her purse and her jacket at the bottom of the sign. And she jumped from that 50-foot H down the mountain. And I'm going to insert a couple of pictures too that I thought were pretty cool that I found online, just because it was interesting to me, and I'm weird, morbid like that. But where it talks about, like, I found her death certificate. It says that she actually died from multiple fractures. I'm going to put a little bit of something here because it's driving me crazy. Multiple fractures to the pelvis as a result of a suicide attempt. So I thought that was kind of interesting. Now, the ghost stories about her, though, are what we're here for. I just wanted to give some background because, you know, poor Peg, she didn't get any fame, any love from Tinseltown at all. The news outlets were horrible to that poor thing. I mean, because they're just like, oh, she couldn't hack it in film, so she killed herself. You know, I mean, I've read a lot of news articles and I was like, how could they? They're so cruel in the way that they're talking about this poor woman. So, and the news even made it to New York, where they said, you know, successful stage actress couldn't make it in film and commit suicide. So, I mean, it made nationwide news. So she became famous because she killed herself. um, but it was the next day before anyone found her. It was a woman that was hiking who decided she wanted to remain anonymous. She found the purse, looked in there for identification, found the suicide note, picked up the purse, the jacket, the shoe, saw Peg's body, and immediately just dropped everything off at the nearest police station on the stairs, and then called another police station anonymously to say, I left this stuff at this other police station. I don't want any involvement in this whatsoever. I don't know what's going on. I just want them to know to look outside. I left these things. There's a woman up there and she's dead. So they go up, they find her body. Since it's signed PE for the suicide note, they don't know who she is. So they ended up having to publish the suicide note in the newspaper. And her uncle happened to see it in the paper and recognized the handwriting. And Peg hadn't been home in 2 days at this point. So he was like, he went to the police station. He identified the body. It was Peg. They had a small service. She was cremated. She ended up being shipped to Ohio, where her father was buried, and buried in his plot. And they didn't even have a gravestone. She didn't have a gravestone for over 70 years. And interestingly enough, a Facebook group raised money to get a tombstone put in place for her and her father, since they're in the same plot. But anyway, so the haunting story started in the 40s, actually, because the H sign, or the H from Hollywood land, fell. It fell over. And so people thought it was the spirit of Peg, saying, I'm still here, and she knocked over. But people report that they'll see a woman in a very nice 1930s style dress, pretty blonde hair, blue eyes. She looks distraught and confused. If they approach her, though, she'll vanish in thin air. People have reported seeing someone at the top of the H jump off more than once. The rangers out there talk about motion sensors that go off on the letters, because, it's a highly guarded area now. And they go up and there's nothing there, but yet there'll be a motion sensor going off saying that there's something right beside them. So that's kind of interesting. Another common thing that people report is not only do they see her, but they smell her. She had a signature scent. She loved gardenias. And that's a girl after my heart, because I love gardenias. One of my favorite perfumes got discontinued, and it smells so much like gardenias, and I miss it. But she always wore gardenia perfume. So people have reported seeing her and smelling gardenias. People have reported that they see mists sometimes at the trails and have a very heavy smell of gardenias. And even park rangers that work up there have reported, like, when they had to go and investigate when things would go off with their security system, smelling a heavy smell of gardenias. And there are no gardenias that grow in that area. They don't grow there. It's not the right environment for gardenias to grow. There are no gardenia plants. So everybody thinks it's Peg. I also found another story where some guys managed to break in once, and one of them kind of fell downhill a ways, and he was having a really hard time getting back up. And he reported seeing a woman in a 30s styles dress, and she almost seemed to be etherically floating up, going up the hill like it was nothing. And he was struggle busting hard. And afterwards, he had never heard of Peg. He and his two buddies were up there just kind of being stupid. They never actually heard of her, because she, again, never made it big in movies. And the only way that anybody knows who she is if you happen to come up on somebody that talks about her, because she never made it big. So it was 3 years later that they heard of her. And he's like, oh my God, that's the woman I saw, because he saw a picture. He's like, that's the woman I saw. And yeah, I smelled gardenias. So I think that's kind of cool too. So anyway, that's pretty much the story of Peg. The only other place that anyone has ever reported seeing her or smelling her is actually at the house of her uncle that she lived in while she was there, like after she moved out of the women's house. So occasionally there's a report of her scent or seeing her there. But otherwise, it is only at the Hollywood sign and the trails around there that people report seeing her. So whether or not it's true, I don't know. I've never been to the Hollywood sign going looking for her, but I do think it's an interesting story, but I also think it's such a tragic story because she was only 24 years old and she was so full of potential, and she just felt so crushed because, you know, fate was handing her a really tough card. And I mean, I don't know if this is true or not, but I did find several sources that did report this. A telegram actually came the day after her body was identified. That was a company that was offering her a lead role in a production. And ironically, the role was for a woman who would eventually commit suicide. So, you know, if she had just waited a few days, if that's true, that might have been her big break that she was waiting for. But she was just too depressed and too distraught. So, you know, it's tragic to think of anyone getting to that point where they're so hopeless that or they're just like, I'm done. Especially someone so young and so talented. I do want to throw a disclaimer out there, you know, if anybody ever feels, you know, those kinds of feelings, you know, please contact a suicide prevention hotline, talk to someone, talk to your friends, talk to your family, get with a therapist, get help. You know, there is help out there. Things may be hard. Like, we're going through rough times now. This plague stuff sucks for everybody. You know, businesses are shutting down. Our economy's tanking. You know, so many people are out of work. So, I mean, things are hard now. So if anybody out there watching is going through those types of feelings, please reach out and get help, because this isn't going to last forever, just like the Great Depression didn't last forever. So yeah, I just wanted to throw that disclaimer out too. So anyway, that was the story of Peg Entwistle. And this is a traditional 1930s look. It's driving me crazy. I don't know why they would, I mean, they didn't have shimmers back then, so I guess that's why they wanted the Visine, or, you know, Vaseline, not Visine, gosh, Vaseline on their eyelids to make it look shinier, but all it does is just crease. It feels so gross. I do like how they did their lips, though. The ombre looks pretty. And, I mean, the way that they would do their rouge, it's not terrible, because what they were looking for was like a heart-shaped face. There was no such thing as contouring and highlighting back then. You had cake foundation, you had your cream blusher or your lipstick, you had your loose powder that you would put on with a powder puff, and then you had whatever eyeshadow you could get your hands on, and this was the typical color that was used. And you had a pencil that you would draw your eyebrows on with. Most women back then just shaved off their eyebrows so they could have the shape. And then you would have your spit mascara, you know, your that you would put on. And I mean, I've put a couple of coats on because I do know that eyelashes were really important back then, because they really wanted to draw attention to their eyes. Because in the 20s, now I'm just getting like informative on y'all. In the 20s, that owl kind of eye was in, where the eyes actually looked smaller because they had so much dark makeup around their eyes that it was the exact opposite of how we're taught to do makeup now. It like closed their eyes. They had lower eyebrows. They had the fantastic Clara Von Bow lip, which I can do, thankfully, because of my lip shape. But in the 30s, they brightened it more. Again, the shimmer, but they wanted the eyes to be really open. That's one of the reasons that Betty Davis was so famous, was for her eyes, because she has those incredibly big, beautiful eyes. And if you look at old studio photos of actresses from the time, you know, you'll notice that they have a lot of mascara on. They have much thinner eyebrows than I have right now, but they are highly arched. And, you know, again, it's not a lot of makeup that they used, but they accentuated their lips and they wanted their eyes to pop. So now you've learned a little bit about what a traditional 30s makeup look actually is. It's that easy to do if you wanted to do it authentic. I think that if I ever chose to do this again, I'd modernize it a little bit. I'd use some shimmer because this Vaseline's gonna make me crazy. I'm gonna have to wash this straight off as soon as I'm done. But anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed hearing about Peg Entwistle. Like I said, I thought that it was an interesting story. You know, it's a tragic story, but it was interesting. I thought the haunting behind the Hollywood sign was also interesting. And I thought it would be fun to at least attempt a 30s look, and I got it. There it is. This will be the only time you'll ever see me with Vaseline on my freaking eyes. So anyway, thanks so much, you guys, for watching. If you like the content of my channel, please subscribe. Hit the like button, tickle that little notification bell, you know, and I hope to see you all again soon. Like I said, I'm going to try to do one of these a week. If you have any suggestions, shoot them my way. If you have a look that you want me to do, shoot it my way. I might be able to do it and be awesome. I'll attempt it either way. If I fail, then everybody gets to see me fail, and that's fun too. So anyway, I hope you guys have a great day. Thanks so much. Bye, you guys.